I think we should get started, and Caleb can continue to let people in as they join. Welcome to everyone. It's great to see such an amazing outpouring of participation today from across the country, but it isn't really a surprise since the Forest Legacy Program is so important and supports so many great projects around the country. My name's Kathy DeCoster. I am sitting in for Leslie Kane Chenal, who's the chair of the LWCF Coalition. She's at Conservation Day events at the Department of the Interior with President Biden. So that's exciting, and I agreed to fill in. I retired from the Trust for Public Land in 2019 after a 25-year career there, and consulting with the coalition now. In my career, I worked on many successful forest legacy projects, and I actually was a Senate staffer working for a Maine senator when we created the program in 1990. So it is just so amazing to see how successful Forest Legacy Program is today. It's all that we had hoped for. I'm thrilled that we're joined today by Scott Stewart, National Program Manager for the Forest Legacy Program and the Community Forest and Open Space Conservation Program, and Claire Harper, Senior Program Specialist for the Forest Legacy Program. We at the Coalition are really excited about the partnership we have with the Forest Legacy team, and we're grateful that they're here today to walk through the Forest Legacy funding opportunity through the Inflation Reduction Act. As everyone probably knows, the LWCF Coalition and all of our many partners led the effort to secure this additional $700 million in the IRA bill, and we're very appreciative to all who helped us get that over the finish line. It's a pretty big deal. This new big investment in Forest Legacy is also a result of all the hard work done by the team at the Forest Service and the states and the nonprofit partners who raised the program's level of excellence and have ensured so many successful achievements. Another important reason that Forest Legacy was included in IRA is that it is a great tool to address climate resilience and carbon sequestration. As you may know, the IRA funding is complementary to, but different from, the core LWCF funded Forest Legacy projects, and you will hear more about this today from the Forest Legacy team. Scott and Claire, we are very much looking forward to hearing from you about the goals and specifics of how the IRA dollars will be rolled out. This will be a very informative session with lots of new information for folks. After Scott and Claire's presentation, there will be time for Q&A, which will be led by LWCF Coalition Manager Amy Lindholm. Please put any questions you have in the Q&A using the tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get to all the questions. Thanks again to everyone who's on this call for helping make the program a success. And let's hear now from Claire and Scott.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you to the LWCF Coalition for hosting us today. I'm Claire Harper, one of the national leads for the program, along with Scott, who I'll turn to in a second. I'm going to share my screen and start into the presentation mode. But while I do that, I just really want to stress that everything we're going to share today is pre-decisional and open for your feedback, comments, questions, examples of what you're thinking about at the field level, helping us refine and polish up what we plan to have as 2 funding announcements coming out this spring. But intent for today is to hear from you share where we're at and what our current plans, but get that feedback before we finalize. We have been a little bit on a road show, so I did notice through the participants coming on board that we've got some of our federal colleagues from across the country that work from our Forest Legacy team, some state coordinators also on our national Forest Legacy program community, and then many of you NGO, local partners, land conservation and land trust partners who may have been, have been part of our communication chain over the last several months. And so we're going to share where we're at today. Some of this may be not new news for you, and some of it we've been refining and made some changes since you may have seen it last. So this is a real time, sharing where we're at in this process and where we're headed. And then again, whole goal for today is to hear your feedback. We will host another Q&A session once the funding announcements are out, more around the rules of the road and making sure everybody's clear on that. This one is in a little bit different pre-decisional, pre-announcement mode. That's context. Scott, give you a chance to introduce yourself and then also anything else you want to add before we launch into the content.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Claire. Really great to see so many people here, a lot of names that I recognize, and excited to see a lot of people that I don't know as well. And I see some folks, like Claire said, who've heard some version of this earlier. So, but Claire's been doing a great job of, and it'll be exciting and dynamic, and even if you've heard it before, it'll be great. And appreciate Claire for taking the lead and walking us through this today. And we're really, really excited for us, for the program to be, to have this great opportunity to build on a great process and great partnerships to expand and look at things on the landscape a little bit differently with this opportunity. Thanks, Claire.
Really do wish we could see you all in an actual room and see your faces, lots of familiar names. So glad you could join us today. So, to start with, if I can get my thing to advance. Okay. Just quick touch point on program basics.
Claire, you're on presenter mode, or we see your notes.
Well, that's silly. That's what we were trying to figure out early. So if I get out of, I do not want to see the notes, but does anybody have any tips? Because I don't see them myself.
Can you click display settings and see if it'll fix there?
So share screen. Nope, that's still the same.
That's better, Claire.
It's better.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
That looks right.
Okay, it looks exactly the same to me, so I am mystified by this. But we will go with it. So you no longer see the notes that may or may not have even been correct because they tag along with different slides over time. Okay, thank you for that catch, Andy. Really appreciate it. So if you are new to our program, or just as a quick refresher, we are a fairly mature program, over 30 years, began in the 1990 Farm Bill, and have a robust history of implementing projects, conservation easements, and fee acquisition in partnership with states across the country. We have, for the last 15 years, or actually nearly 20 years, since 2004, been funded by the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So we're part of the suite of Land and Water Conservation funded programs. Prior to that, we were funded through a different funding source. And as is kind of the purpose of the call, and the exciting thing to share is we now have additional funding provided through the Inflation Reduction Act, in addition to our core funding provided through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So thank you to everyone who has advocated on our behalf and our overall mission of protecting land through this, through the LWCF and now through the Inflation Reduction Act we call IRA. We are a program that operates through grants to states, and we also operate through a competitive process, which I'm sure many of you know well, and maybe have all of the best tips and tricks for how to navigate our process. But that is something that hasn't changed through IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. We were directed to continue to fund and deliver projects in partnership with states through our normal process. To date, we have 54 states and territories enrolled. And one thing core to our program is that states determine what are the eligible areas, as well as the program goals, both specific to each forest legacy areas they're called, but also for what the state is going to emphasize and prioritize through this program. and those are identified in the forest action plans and associated state assessment of needs. To date, we are still hovering close to 3 million acres, and we're waiting for the moment we cross, and we're going to see if we get an award to the project that gets us across the finish line. 456 projects completed, and over $2 billion of total investments, of which I do want to highlight the majority. The federal funding, a solid $1 billion over our history, but partners have matched us with all your help, exceeding $1 billion. So the IRA funding is getting all the attention at the moment, but I do want to highlight we've got significant and long-term investments in private forest investment over the history of our program, with a whole suite of goals and public benefits provided through that work. We are a conservation easement and a fee simple acquisition program. Majority of our acres are conservation easements, but we have a number of states that prioritize and have moved forward a significant land base of what are now state-owned and managed lands, whether it's state parks, wildlife areas, and others. Scott, I do want to allow you to keep chiming in on each side. So anything to add as far as program kind of basics and our accomplishments to date?
No, doing great. This is great. Thank you, Claire.
So funding, just a quick highlight of funding history. So LWCF funding has been our core funding and still is our core funding. And for the last 10 years, we have seen an increase thanks to the Great American Outdoors Act and the full funding of LWCF. We moved from a $50 to $60 million program up to high water mark of $94 million a year, right now down closer to 80 or right below 80 million. So that alone was really exciting for us as a program to see that bump up, and appreciate everybody's efforts in getting the LWCF to be permanently and fully funded. Then we had last August, while many of us were on vacation, and returned to the very exciting and almost surprising news that we as a program were the recipient of $700 million additional funds through the Inflation Reduction Act. This, we understand, is in addition and intended to be in addition to our annual funding provided through LWCF. The language specific to our program was pretty basic, said do more forest legacy. That's how we interpret it, through competitive grants to states. We didn't get further direction or further emphasis areas, although we are keeping a watch on some of the overall purposes, such as climate resilience and climate mitigation in the bill. But overall, the direction we got from Congress is to do more forest legacy and more resources to help us do that. The funding expires in 2031, but we plan to obligate into grants all funding by the end of fiscal year 2027, so that we have time for full implementation of those projects, because all funds fully expire in 2031. So our projects take a while sometimes to implement, but we also sometimes have project failures or cost savings that we want to allow time for those recoveries to turn into additional projects as applicable. And so that's part of the thinking behind having that in funding obligated by 2027. I will highlight that is true for all IRA funded programs through at least our department. We've all been directed to get money out the door within the first 5 years, not spend it out through the full 9 years, so that we can be full. The program is fully implemented at the end of the bill. We do have match waiver authority given to this program as well as others through IRA, so that's separate language. Our intention and the direction we've received through our agency and department is that it's intended to be granted in limited circumstances, not a broad blanket match waiver authority. And we'll cover that a little bit more later. Anything to add, Scott?
No. Right on. We did see additional language at different times and different versions, but what ultimately emerged, just as you said, was this clean, very, very clean language.
Great. So that leaves us now with two colors of money, or two types of money that we are now administering together. So bringing those, the LWCF and IRA funding together on one slide, we will be continuing to to implement our annual competitive process that positions us for a request through the President's budget request to Congress, and then is through the thanks to the Great American Outdoors Act, Congress has committed to fully funding LWCF programs, but reserves the right to allocate the funding across the different programs, and has directed us to provide a project list that they will approve each year. So that's been the process in place since 2021 and will remain the same. And that really, we are considering that our core funding and then IRA, we are working to have the additional opportunities that complement our core funding. We also, using a combination of LWCF and IRA funding, will continue to support states in both administrative and capacity build and capacity enhancement activities. That is, grants to states that's in our normal appropriations. There's actually a line item that says administrative funds. And then we have reserved a small portion of the IRA funding to further extend that capacity so that we can all, collectively achieve this larger workload and meet this opportunity. Do want to note, since there's got so many nonprofit partners on the call, that those administrative funds can be used by states to help reimburse some of your costs for engagement in the program, whether you're helping at the program level or the project level. That is through partnerships at the state level, and some states take advantage of that opportunity in partnership with you all, and others have more in-house capacity. Then the IRA project funding, we are focusing it in 4 categories. One is this year only, we are planning to use the funding to extend what is funded out of the FY23 project proposals. That's this opportunity list that far exceeded what we were able to fund through annual, or what was approved through annual appropriations. I'll share a few more details on that later, but that is a one-time only that we are going into, kind of taking the existing process and marrying it up with using IRA funding to extend what we fund out of what came through the LWCF process. And then moving forward, we'll have IRA specific requests for proposals that will focus, at least as we have conceived so far, around 3 project opportunities. The first will be large scale, high impact projects with exceptional public benefits. Second, a focus on small strategic tracks. So kind of the flip from the large landscape projects, really focus there on strategic and holdings, as well as complementing existing protected lands. And then a final offering around tribal partnership projects. I'm going to share more details on all of these funding categories. This is just the overview of how we're planning to combine and have LWCF and IRA funding work together. Anything to add, Scott?
Nope.
Okay. So the timelines are getting a bit confusing, and I know many of you are track our normal timeline, and that's a timeline that involves the states as well as the federal level, and now we're going to add more complexity to that. So wanted to kind of walk you through this as best as we can, and I'm sure there will be more questions as you wrap your heads around this, because we're still wrapping our heads around how these different timelines interplay with each other. So the kind of a cornerstone of this conversation is that LWCF funding requires the process to go through the President's budget process development, the President's budget formulation process, of which our competitive process helps feed into that, and then the review and consideration by Congress, and then a final funding through appropriations. So our LWCF funding cycles have a longer timeline to them. IRA funding is in our hands, available to use and deploy. There still will be process and communication with the Hill and the different parts of the administration before we issue that funding, but we can deploy that in a faster turnaround. So as a result, we have kind of different opportunities around different fiscal years. So again, I'm going to walk through that, and I think this will hopefully start to make sense as we go through the rest of this presentation. So first thing for this current fiscal year, FY23, we did receive funding through the appropriations bill that was passed in December for 14 projects, and that in 13 states. If you haven't seen that news, that is on our website, and the project list was also in the appropriations bill itself. Congress also directed us in this last appropriations to submit within 45 days a reprogramming request for funds that we had available from failed projects and cost savings, what we called recovered funding, and to submit that within 45 days for them for further consideration. So that right now is in Congress's hands for consideration and would extend what is funded, if approved, what would it be funded out of the FY23 list. For those that may be tracking this a little more closely, we went through down the supplemental list. So our original proposal to Congress had a core funding and then a supplemental list, and essentially reprogramming is allowing us to go into that supplemental list, and that is what Congress asked us to do. So that is partially done, and hopefully we'll have news to share, and hopefully it will be positive news on that reprogramming request that is still pending. I'm going to pause there. Scott, anything to add on current funding for projects?
No, I think you've done a good job in covering it. So just to touch on the reprogramming, I think many of you understand, what we're talking about, and each year there's direction about reprogramming, and essentially, as it relates to the Forest Legacy Program, any funds that are recovered from projects, either because of cost savings or because the project doesn't ultimately work out, those funds are recovered, and we have to ask Congress for permission to actually use those funds for another project. So even if this year we were recovering something that was 3 or 4 years old, we would have to ask permission. We are really excited about all the changes we've seen recently, including the Great American Outdoors Act and what it did for LWCF in making it mandatory. The little wrinkle there as it relates to reprogramming is what we're reprogramming right now is pre-mandatory money. And so we're not ultimately certain about what the reprogramming guidance will be about, LWCF funds now that they are in fact mandatory. But that's a little wrinkle of inside information that, well, I think some of you understand those details, but just wanted to touch on that. Claire?
Great, thank you. So hopefully we'll hear that news soon and be able to share that out. Meanwhile, we also reconvened the original National Review Panel to look at the full opportunity list that was remaining not yet funded from the FY23 proposals for IRA funding consideration. That panel met last week, and we have a set of preliminary recommendations. Those are preliminary until we get final word back on reprogramming, and then we would move forward those for the selected projects for IRA funding. If all goes well, we will announce somewhere in April or May what was funded, the additional projects funded both through reprogramming and IRA funding for FY23. This is very exciting for us. Our bench strength or our opportunity lists always far exceed what has been available to us through regular funding. And here's an opportunity for us to be able to look at and to kind of really broaden the suite of projects that can move forward in real time. As I mentioned before, this kind of combining of our regular process and IRA funding, this is a one-time exception that we were granted from our leadership. And the case that we made is that it takes sometimes multiple years, but at least a year for a project to be developed and submitted through our regular process. And if there was an interest in getting money sooner out the door, then using the existing suite of proposals that we already had in hand, had already been vetted, had already been refined through many different, our peer review process, as well as our national review process, that was our best way to move forward an initial round of funding. So again, a one-time opportunity for those of you that have FY23 proposals. This turns out it's likely a good year for you to have submitted a proposal this year. And we're excited to hopefully get that news out sooner than later. While we are, implementing and further considering FY23 project proposals, we are also initiating actually just announced through the president's budget, the release of the president's budget, the proposed list of projects for FY24. That was released last week. There are 10 priority projects and on the core list and 7 additional projects on the supplemental list. We'll note our president's budget, our proposed project list will likely change over the next several months, as there were a number of resubmissions that are also under consideration through the other FY23 funding opportunities. When we have, so we will at some point recast that list. We'll at least share that forward to the appropriations committees. Usually our recasted lists are not public, but I do want to highlight that do know there's going to be some flux on that list. And we go through a process with OMB and the appropriators when there are changes to our recommended priority projects for consideration for the next fiscal year. Scott, anything to add on that detail?
No, thanks, Claire.
So that gets then to the context under which we will be issuing our next 2 funding opportunities, the brand new opportunities. So the first will be, first out the gate will be our annual call letter and associated scoring guidance. We issue that call letter to regions to work with states, and yet we also post that on our website. So it's a little bit different from some of the other ways that programs issue a request for proposals. So we call it a call letter. We'll be issuing that hopefully within the next month and with a September deadline for proposals for our FY25 LWCF program, our core funding. Then following that, we're targeting June, we'll have a separate and distinct request for proposals for IRA funded proposals. That will be for FY24 funding consideration. And this again goes to that there's a difference of the timing in which we can deliver these 2 types of money. IRA funding, we are envisioning 2 different deadlines, 6 months apart from each other, staggered from separate from our core or LWCF deadline. So a September deadline, December deadline, and a May deadline is what we're looking at. The reason for 2 deadlines on the IRA funding is we've heard that there are some projects ready to go, states and project partners anxious for the opportunity to put forward highly ready, highly strategic projects, while others are telling us we need some more time for project development. So at least for this first year, we're planning 2 deadlines for future years. And we do plan to issue IRA requests for proposals over the next 4 years. We may revert to 1 deadline after this initial pulse, but we will make that decision later. And I'm going to go more details on this coming, so I'm going to keep going. So a few details underneath or around the annual core call for projects for the LWCF process. This year we are planning, and again, this is pre-decisional. The call letter is not out on the streets yet. But will be soon, hopefully by April. Planning to have the same sideboards as before and pretty similar call letter to last year. So if you're working on a project, pick up last year's scoring guidance. It's on our website if you want to get a head start on some of this work. Planning to have states can request up to 20 million again for 1 to 3 projects. Change this year is that we will allow for resubmissions. It's actually not a change this year. It's a change we made last year, but making sure that everybody knows about the opportunity to submit 1 to 3 new projects up to 20 million. Plus, if you've got projects currently in consideration for FY24, and specifically that you can resubmit that one without it counting against your state cap. As always, for our regular process, projects can be for either a single tract or with multiple tracts and multiple landowners. As I mentioned before, we plan to get that call letter out the door in April, and that would be posted on our website with a slightly earlier national deadline than years past. And that's to meet OMB requested, Office of Management Budget requested deadlines to better align with the President's budget process. That's just a couple weeks earlier than before, but for those that have been around the program for a while, we used to have a Thanksgiving deadline. We are now working on, we don't even have a holiday associated with September 18th. So a early fall deadline compared to what used to be a Thanksgiving deadline. As always, projects must first be submitted to state lead agencies for review and ranking at the state level by the state stewardship coordinating committees before they are submitted to the into our national process. And we will continue to use the Forest Legacy Information System, and that applies both for regular funding as well, LWCF funding, as well as IRA proposals. And do expect that we will continue to have regional peer review panels to assist you in the project proposal and refinement before that national process or final deadline. And we will continue to, and again, the scoring guidance will be very similar to what we've issued in the last several years, holding true to our core criteria, importance, threat, and strategic, and also our additional considerations that panels use to help determine final ranks. Everything from project readiness, state capacity, and state performance, outstanding funds. In the recent years, we've added climate resilience data from TNC that we look at alongside these other factors. And this year we will be adding an analysis of alignment with disadvantaged communities as identified through the CGEST geospatial tool. More to come on that topic as we go into, once we release this call letter, we'll have some more learning around that CGEST data and how it applies to our program. Okay, that's a mouthful for regular process. Anything to add, Scott?
Well said, Claire. Like you said, very, very similar. And, you know, if you want to sort of keep track of what the changes are, each year the scoring guidance pretty clearly calls out what changes there were to the previous year. So it's a bit self-contained, so you can see those.
All right, it's all posted on our website, not this year's yet, but it will be.
Yeah, it's right up there.
Last year's is very applicable if you're wanting to start working on your national application. Of course, keep in mind, each state has a different application process. So sometimes you have to do a totally different state application before you're working on a national. But for our purposes, do look at and keep handy our scoring guidance. Then for IRA call letter, as I mentioned before, we're planning to issue that, if all goes well, in June. We're in the listening, getting partner feedback mode right now to refine our plans for this initial offering. We'll actually be ending our listening mode at the end of this month, and then moving forward, finalizing our call letter and associated scoring guidance, and then moving that through clearance. Anything through IRA takes a little bit more process and eyes on it through our leadership chain. So there may be changes that we encounter and direction that we get before it's final. And that's why there's a little bit more time as well, just for that back and forth. We are allow time between this, our work ending and then moving it, releasing it, but again, targeting it in June. 2 deadlines, as I mentioned before, staggered December and May to allow for, if you're ready to come in, that you've got an opportunity to get funding sooner, or if you need some more time to develop your project, then take advantage of the second deadline. We do plan to issue IRA-specific call letters on an annual basis through 2026, so that we can meet our goal of obligating all funding by the federal fiscal year 2027. And we are going to be allocating funding across the different fiscal years based on the number of eligible and quality proposals received. And that is one thing that's a balance. We have $700 million total budget over this period of time. And so but we do not plan to we certainly do not intend to put all money out the door in year one. Many projects take, a number of years to develop. And so we'll be keeping an eye on providing an opportunity this year and through those 4 years. But I think the key thing that I'm trying to say here is we're reserving the right to, if we don't, we'll put out a funding announcement of a certain level that we can't announce here. But if we don't receive sufficient quality proposals, then we will roll that funding over to the next year. We're not going to put money out the door just because we have it. And that's, just to maximize this opportunity for us all in achieving quality work on the ground. I'm going to go through more details on this specific, because that's why we've got, folks on the call, but kind of big picture grounding here. Scott, anything to add?
No.
Okay, thank you. So for IRA funded or IRA proposals, you still must meet the same Forest Legacy Program requirements. Still must be within or at least partially within a forest legacy area as established by the state in the State Forest Action Plan. And your projects will be going through the state process, same as our LWCF proposals, and go through the state's application process and then reviewed and approved by the State Forest Stewardship Coordinating Committee. As I mentioned before, we also will be continuing to use FLIS, Forest Legacy Information System, to collect project information for consideration at the national level. We are working to have an additional section called, and it's focused on special emphasis criteria that I'll cover in a few minutes. So IRA proposals will be evaluated based on core criteria, the additional considerations, as well as special emphasis criteria specific to each funding category. And yet we're going to ask for or provide a way to provide all of that information in the same database that you know and love, called the Forest Legacy Information System. Hope you love it. It's a system that has served our program well, despite some of its idiosyncrasies. And we will still require 25% match based on our program statute. That's the same as our regular process. IRA funding, there is an opportunity for match waivers, and we will provide in our call letter what's the process in the sideboards if you want to request that. Do know that we're envisioning that would be applicable for small strategic tracts and tribal projects, if there's the need and the circumstances that support it. But we are not contemplating cost share waivers for large landscape projects. It's not that it's prohibited for the large projects, but it would really need to be an exceptional case made to be able to match at that type of project. A few more details to come, but Scott, anything specific, especially for that match waiver, to add there?
No, I think you've covered it. I think you're going to get to some of the rationale and as we continue on here too. So let's keep going.
Okay. So quickly going to go through the 3 different project types that we will be making available through IRA. If I didn't mention it, or maybe it's just worth repeating, we are planning a single request for projects or a call letter under which you would select which type of project you would like to apply for. And a state can apply for multiple project types. So it's not that we're going to have a request for proposals specific to large landscape projects and another one specific to small tracts. It's all going to be within one umbrella IRA call letter to be released hopefully in June. So the first project category will be large landscape high impact projects. This is intended to be what we were kind of informally calling once in a lifetime or keystone large scale high impact projects in ecologically or economically significant landscapes where a large investment with a single landowner can make available lands that otherwise would not be possible to move into conservation. Little clunky to say, but really looking at this is large funding investment that would be for a could be multiple tracts of land, but all held within by a single land legal entity, a single landowner. And we're hoping that by putting this amount of money on the table, which is up to 50 million, that it would make your jobs possible to negotiate some land deals that really haven't necessarily been on the table yet, or to move forward some of those dreams that you've had and yet not necessarily been able to move into action, where you've got a signature project in a state that you've wanted to move forward, but not really had the level of funding available. So that's the intent here. We are envisioning this would be both a conservation easement or planning, that this is both available for both conservation easement and fee simple acquisitions. And that we will develop a process if a project spans multiple states, that there would be a submission through each state to make sure that each state is on board and committed to that project, but there would still be one offering for one project, one landowner at the up to 50 million level. This is a project type where we will be in the kind of alignment with core criteria, looking for exceptional alignment, high scores, but really high exceptional public benefits and a demonstration of that. That is what we mean by high impact. High leverage will give more consideration for projects that have more than the required cost share, brings more non-federal funding to the table to make this deal happen. Looking for a case to be made that it's more efficient to move forward this deal all at once instead of phasing over time, whether it's efficient and cost effective, efficiency of scale, as well as the cost effectiveness of a one-time investment and one transaction instead of, again, that phasing that we have kind of all gotten used to and is part and parcel to our normal process. We will also be looking for high readiness, the ability to move forward a project within 3 years, a little bit longer window than we normally say is our goal, but we do recognize large projects can have a lot of complexity. So 3 years would be the performance period, and sufficient state capacity to move forward a project of this nature, state and partner capacity. And also affirmation and a plan provided around the state's ability to manage this large project over time to meet the post-acquisition stewardship and monitoring requirements. For this project and also the other offerings, we will be also asking applicants to demonstrate how that project aligns with a set of national priorities. Both priorities that are held within the purposes of the IRA funding, as well as some additional administration priorities. But they're also aligned really well with our program and our program goals. So climate resilience, carbon sequestration, habitat connectivity, and benefits for disadvantaged communities are a few of those national priorities, the ones that we will ask applicants to provide a case for how you benefit or contribute to that. It does not mean your project has to meet all of those. It's just an opportunity to further emphasize the alignment. That's again a lot to share, all in one slide. Scott, bring to life a few more details on this offering. Anything I missed or that you want to further expand on?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, so we've definitely, you know, have increased the size of projects over the last couple of years, but you know, this is an idea that you know, some of these opportunities, you know, this is one of those things we've heard from partners, you know, over the years that you know, legacy, as Claire mentioned earlier, is we've never been able to meet all the needs in any given year, and you know, there are sometimes opportunities that are you know, even bigger, even as we continue to grow and raise opportunities and fund larger projects. So this is, you know, really you know, exciting for us, but you know, this is with this influx of funds, it's, you know, to really move the needle in some key conservation landscapes, you know, so it's pretty exciting, but I think you've covered it very well, Claire.
And I'm expecting we'll have some questions around this as well as the other IRA project categories, and that will help hopefully bring some of this to life and how it might apply in your world. I do want to, before I leave this slide, emphasize we're really going to be looking for this exceptional alignment with our core criteria. So this is not, you know, these will be the what is it called? The cream of the crop? Is that the expression? You know, your signature, you're really the projects you're most proud of, not just about the largest dollar amounts, but really be looking for that high quality, not just scale.
Yeah,
and I want to further emphasize that.
That's right. So large doesn't just, it's really, you know, impact. You know, some people have asked about that, and we envision some of these to be very large acres, but it's really the impact, not just, you know, the opportunity for lots of acres. You know, that's not really how we necessarily measure, you know, the public benefits.
And recognizing large can mean very different things in different places. In some places it's hundreds of thousands of acres, and others it's 1,000. So we're not, I just wanted to stress that this is really about the quality, the importance, the impact, as Scott said, of these projects, with a fair amount of money to move forward these opportunities with single landowners, whether they're family or corporate landowners in your neck of the woods. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving and then we'll get to the question. You know, opportunity to have more dialogue on this and the other ones in a moment. The flip side of our large high impact projects is strategic small tracts. So I think, again, key context is we're adding these funding opportunities to complement our core process, what is the funding that we provide to projects through LWCF. And one of the things that we have heard through years is our core process is there's a suite of projects that compete well and can move forward. Things that have struggled are larger projects. Right now, we require larger projects and higher dollar projects to come in multiple years, often phased over multiple years. And there's many challenges for that, as well as no guarantee that your next phase of funding will get funded. And we've also heard that, you know, if you trying to move forward smaller tracts, yes, there's the ability to combine multiple tracts into a single proposal and put that forward. But if you're working on, you know, with one landowner, one tract, but yet it's really important to your community, to your area, to your landscape, that those are challenging to get through our process, especially for those that are less than $1 million, sometimes less than a 2 million level. So opening up a door for those projects to come in under their own and have their own competition, their own funding, focused on that. That said, we don't want all small tracts, random, you know, the classic or cliche expression of random acts of conservation, putting focus here on strategic inholdings or adjacent properties that complement already protected lands. Some of those already protected lands may be those that our program has previously invested in, or they may be other conservation easement or other public lands, whether it's federal and state. We're also going to be putting a bit of focus here, but it is not to the exclusion of others, but a focus on family forest owners, non-industrial landowners. We are envisioning that project proposals would be, that we'll have a cap somewhere in the $1 to $2 million range, still in debate, available per tract and per landowner through this option. Really trying to, put forward something that is harder to get through our normal process at a level. We are also envisioning that states would be able to put forward multiple projects in this category per year. There likely will be a state cap of how many, but we are still working through those details, while as the large high impact projects would be just one project opportunity per year per state. Still, this would be easement and fee acquisition, same as our normal process. And we would be asking each tract, even though there's relatively small dollars as well as acres, to be submitted in its own standalone proposal, not bundled with other tracts as is in our normal process. If you have many different tracts that you're trying to move forward and want to, in a given landscape, in a given watershed, in a given wildlife corridor, that still is available to you through the LWCF tracts. This is for individual tracts that are very strategic, and you would need to put forward a proposal specific to those. This, our special emphasis criteria for this offering will really double down on that strategic value, whether it's strategic value for in the values, not only the complementing the other protected lands, but the benefits of that, whether it's enhanced public access, whether it's a better, continuity of management. We would expect a lot of projects will come in with a public access benefit to that. For those that were on previous calls, have backed away from that being a requirement, but we will still be kind of emphasizing, especially where it's applicable to the strategic value. This one, we will be looking very closely at readiness to move forward this tract within a 1-year time frame. So if your small tract isn't, and your work with your landowner isn't ready enough to move forward in that time frame, wait for the next IRA opportunity. This is really about, can we move forward these types of projects with private landowners in a pretty fast turnaround time. And we will be looking for affirmation that the state is positioned to monitor these smaller tracts over time, recognizing that has its own unique workload and set of responsibilities. Similar to the other offering, we will be looking for alignment with and contributions to a few national themes. In this case, we don't envision in carbon sequestration being very applicable to small tracts just because of the scale that we're envisioning, but we could see tangible benefits for climate resilience, habitat connectivity, and disadvantaged communities. And the last offering will be, this is one that we get, oh, sorry, Scott, I'm going to give you back a chance for small tracts, some of our intent thinking behind this one.
Yeah, I think it's been well covered, Claire. Just the one thing I'll touch on. So, we're talking a lot about these different timelines and how they intersect, and Claire did a good job of the overview of that. And even though some of these, timelines, like, we're soon to be looking at 24 IRA projects, but we're soon to be looking at 25, normal process projects. So these smaller projects, there is an expectation of a higher degree of readiness, but that money will be available in a relatively streamlined way too. So it's not it's sort of an unreasonable thing that Claire is outlining. We're looking for these these strategic projects can be really key, but we do want them. They do need to move quickly. So thanks, Claire.
And the final project category under our IRA offering is different than what we've offered before. And we've heard some, how would this work in my area? We don't know. This is our trying, we might call it a special challenge category. But projects where a state is actively partners with a tribe to conserve lands of high importance and benefits for that tribe or multiple tribes, the land will still need to be held by the state in accordance with our program statute. But what we're looking for is an agreement or another form of partnership that is solidified that provides for long-term tribal engagement and co-management in the acquired property. This is an offering that we are making at the same scale as our large high impact projects, up to 50 million. We are envisioning this will only be for simple acquisition. That is, trying to keep the focus on the partnership between the state and the tribe, not having an easement with another, a holder and a potential private landowner in the middle of that. So that's why we've thought of this as fee simple only. We are thinking of this as, really putting an emphasis on partnership, but partnership between two governmental entities, sovereign nation and the state government, but making it available to federally and state recognized tribes. Normally for federal funding, we are restricted to state, thinking about federally recognized tribes, but in this case, we're promoting partnership at the state level. So opening that up to state recognized tribes as well, as long as it's recognized by your state. And we are looking for some of what are those equivalent representative governmental entities in places like Hawaii and the territories, that where you may not have the same federal or state recognized tribal government. Again, this is really emphasizing the partnership and that long-term co-management. So our special emphasis criteria will have the emphasis there. Still looking for strong overall quality projects in alignment with core criteria as well as our national themes. But the emphasis that we'll be putting and how we will look at these projects will be around that what is it meaningful partnership and long-term agreement with that tribe, between the tribe and the state. We don't know if we're going to get anything in this category. We hope so. This is again a challenge to us as a larger community to try to open up some doors that may right now be more just speculative, or you just haven't had funding to go behind it, or you haven't made the phone call yet. And so really just a door opener type of opportunity. Hopefully we will get robust and solidified projects. Maybe we won't in the first year and we will in year 3. So that's our special challenge built into our request for proposals. Scott, what to add here?
Yeah, I think as some of you who've worked with the program know that there is a long history of projects where there is a lot of tribal support and importance to tribes, both fee and conservation easements, and that those remain available, and there's lots of great examples of those. So as part of the core process, and we've actually added language over the last few years, really encouraging additional outreach and partnering with tribes in our normal core process. But this is, like Claire said, it's thinking a little bit differently, a little larger. What kind of partnership might be able to look like in a real idea of thinking about co-stewardship. It's not the idea of buying lands exclusively for the tribe or managing them exclusively for the tribe. Not like that. We don't believe that we could do this and add lands to trust land. This really is within our current program as it exists. What could that a really deep and enduring partnership look like? And so that's what Claire said. We have sideboards on it, but we're really looking forward to some exploring and some thinking on this. So thanks, Claire, for that. Janstedt.
And I think that, yeah, that brings us to the end of our presentation. I know we have shared a ton of details, ton of ideas, and really want to now open it up for questions, feedback, further emphasize everything we just shared is not yet final. And we really want to hear from you how this kind of plays out at the local level in your part of the world. What opportunities do you see and what challenges do you see with the plan that we have put in place? With that context, I'm going to hand it over to Amy and Kathy to help us move into the Q&A part of this call. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, which will allow me to see you all instead of just see these slides.
Thanks. Kathy, is there anything that you want to say before I start reading out some of these questions?
No, I think we jump right into the questions because I know there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's quite a few, and they seem like very intelligent questions. So thank you all so much for the engagement. We really appreciate it. So the first one that I'm just going to start at the top. Donnell Keach, and excuse me if I pronounce anyone's name wrong, has asked about whether IRA capacity building funding could be used to invest in state easement stewardship capacity.
Well, that's a predictable question. And we actually went back and forth whether to have a slide on that or not. So thank you for the question so we can bring this to life. So under our current, the IRA capacity funding will be delivered in concert with our LWCF administrative funding that we deliver to states each year. That funding is available for some aspects of helping a state position themselves, build the foundation, have the solid foundation to redeem their post-acquisition responsibilities, both monitoring, stewardship, and management. Our program policies are not changing. So there are the action of going and monitoring the property, doing the official, record keeping each year of your monitoring visits, any enforcement activities, and then certainly management of your properties is all within the state purview, not covered by federal funding. That is a long-standing program policy that we are not changing with the IRA funding. Would say that the IRA funding, the capacity funding, provides states an opportunity to build a stronger foundation to meet those responsibilities. What I mean by foundation could mean something such as training staff, getting, investing in technologies, record keeping policies, monitoring plans, policies, etc. The list is actually quite long of what can be funded, but it's really about positioning the state for that long-term, to meet those responsibilities long-term, not that the federal government and the Forest Legacy Program is responsible for those costs over the long run. There's kind of a long story of why that program policy exists. So I just want to further not go into that long history, but more further emphasize that that's not changing, but do know that with a bit more funding on the table for capacity building at the state level, there are many aspects of stewardship that is fundable, but it's more about that building a strong foundation. Scott, please add.
No, I think you've covered that well, Claire. I mean, the question was specifically about capacity and positioning them better. Yeah, is allowable. I think people, when we get into detailed conversations about this, people are surprised at how much can be covered. But yeah, there is a fundamental, state responsibility for some aspects here. And, and so it's not, and those responsibilities remain with the state. And as you said, we're not changing policy.
So we have a couple of questions from both Donnell and also Douglas Hadaway about kind of strategy. So questions about, when and how project teams should decide whether LWCF or the IRA track is best for a given project, given the multiple deadlines that are coming. What do you think about that? And also the strategy of submitting the same project with multiple funding cycles in relatively short period of time?
Lot in those questions. So I'll take a first stab and then I'll turn to Scott to add. So we have purposely staggered our deadlines, September, December, and May, so that you can, be working on a project proposal, share it with your state program coordinator, share it with your regional program coordinator, get some feedback. Is this work, does this best fit with LWCF or does this better fit with IRA? We're not precluding that you could submit for both processes, but we are anticipating that many projects will be a better fit for IRA versus a better fit for LWCF. And we're here collectively to help navigate that. We're also, looking at this if, let's say, you put in for an IRA project, a large high impact project, and you put it in May of next year, and then we share feedback. We built in enough time to share feedback and say, we really love your proposal, but this is actually a better fit for LWCF. Please put it into the December or the September deadline. So we staggered our deadlines to try to allow for some interplay and some kind of cross-fertilization between the two opportunities for this year and as we envision further out. But I would really, further emphasize, we do not intend, or the way that we're delivering IRA funding is not to cover all project types, really first and foremost is look at our core project opportunities, our LWCF funding as your base. Like, does your project fit with that? And then these are additional project categories, special challenge opportunities that may or may not fit for you. I think the tension we've heard is because IRA money can be moved quickly, there's a strong interest in making the IRA funding fit for every project type. That's really doesn't serve us collectively well. We need to have, continue to put forward and have a very strong suite of proposals for LWCF funding, while we also put forward a very, and take advantage and a strategic advantage of utilizing this IRA funding to further extend the work we do on the ground. Scott, please help explain that a little bit, maybe from a different angle from your side.
Well, I think you've it touched on it well. We're really trying to take the IRA funds, as we've said, and explore some opportunities that we know exist, and any program can't do everything, and so we're looking to to shore up what we're doing in the conservation landscape with this. And I think you'll see that they really are sort of different ideas and different streams of things between sort of what we think of as our regular and our large and these smaller strategic projects. But having said that, there clearly is going to be some bleed over or opportunity for, as projects develop through time, for them to be in maybe more than one category. So I think don't throw everything at every opportunity, seeing if it'll stick. That's just it's that's certainly sort of too much to make for everybody to make it work. But as Claire said, it's we're not saying like, oh, if you've asked once, that's it. You've got your bite at the apple and you have to go away. That's certainly not what we're anticipating. We certainly invite projects as they develop and change to come in more than once, even in our normal process, as they become stronger. And so we will see, I think, some crossover, but there's some key things to not forget in this whole larger process is that work closely with the states on this, and we haven't, so IRA didn't give us authority to to ignore any of our normal processes. These still have to be within the identified forest legacy areas. They still have to be approved by the states and the State Stewardship Coordinating Committee. All of those things still exist, and so those come with their own set of challenges and how you put things forward and advance things. So I think there, the question specifically was about the strategy of where and how to ask. And, I think that's going to be in somewhat kind of particular to your circumstances. Like Claire said, it's very attractive because the money can be deployed a little more, potentially more quickly with the IRA funds. But, it's, don't try to make something a round hole fit in a square peg fit in a round hole, sorry, mixing. And I think it'll become, apparent, we've heard some people sort of exploring ideas about, sort of small projects that don't quite fit in the small strategic projects. And it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly if they fit or don't fit, even. So yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Claire, with that.
We're not precluding if you have a project you're like, well, it could be it could go into either process, and you're looking at September deadline. Do I go ahead with that, or do I wait to December? You can go ahead for the September deadline and then still have an eligibility to put in for December IRA funding if it fits. This focus, look at when we issue these two requests for proposals. There will be a lot that's similar, but for IRA funding, it's this special emphasis criteria. Do you have a good case to make as far as aligning with the special emphasis criteria or not? And if so, then go forward and give your shot for the IRA. We will be developing a process to track between the different offerings. We decided really early, we don't want to preclude folks from having an opportunity for these different funding types. Hopefully that helps. Long answer to the question. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome. Well, hopefully we have a couple here that are pretty straightforward. First, there are a couple of questions about the large projects and a couple about the small projects. The small projects, there's a couple questions from Janet Morrison and also from Jim Gillespie asking about what the criteria is for waiver or reduction of match besides need. For example, if land is located in an environmental justice community, and then other questions about whether public access is required, if voluntary or mandatory, and can that be flexible?
Or large landscape?
No, first that was specifically about the small tracts. So it's like,
oh, okay. So we are still, so the exact ways that you can request match waiver and under what circumstances, we're still working through those details. That will be something we will, provide that opportunity through the request for proposals. I think we're going to, be not only looking for alignment with what community it's benefiting, but also what is the circumstances of that state and the landowner, and as far as making the case of why a match waiver would be needed. We are going to be looking for the alignment with disadvantaged communities as part of the overall evaluation of both LWCF and IRA funding. But there is a kind of a difference of the circumstances for the landowner and the suite of partners versus the community. That said, of course, they may blend together. And then public access encouraged where applicable, but not required is where we're landing right now. Scott, match waiver, help me out there because I'm trying to figure out how to articulate, what the circumstances where it may apply without us, having fully figured else yet.
So there's a couple things we thought of in the small tracts, and especially for some states who, this opens up some chances for all participating states to get back into landscapes and pick up key pieces. But it also it adds some agility to work with a landowner to move in a shorter time frame. And one attractive thing also is by entertaining the idea of a match waiver on these shorter tracks, a state can also, move quickly without, having to be certain, that they have all this lined up, that we would look at in, weighing against the public benefits and the community that's being achieved and what's being gained you know, I mean, those are the things that we're going to look at, just like we would be looking at prioritizing something to put money towards, you know, accepting the idea of that we would, you know, that we would forego, you know, the federal government would forego what, you know, what Congress has directed in terms of what they expect in a cost share. And, you know, they did provide this authority, but, you know, certainly our leadership did not accept that idea as a carte blanche, and I don't believe that's how Congress intended that. So it would be, you know, really looking at those, just as you said, Claire, what's the benefiting community? You know, what's the real public benefit of this tract? You know, we're not looking at, you know, protecting inholdings of people's, you know, private estates, you know, and that, which also ties into, you know, the idea of sort of public access. I mean, do we need to get public access in every case on these inholdings or adjacent tracts? Well, you know, maybe not. You know, but if you know, if the state's working to improve a trail network, then potentially, you know, is there a reason because of T&E habitat or cultural attributes, or you know, a wetland or wildlife habitat that, you know, public access is kind of contrary? Yeah, well, that you know, you can entertain that idea as you know, not having public access either. You know, if they want to have a special management area as part of that conservation easement, it just then it you know, then those things come along with their own burdens of you know, stewardship. You know, and so we certainly, you know, in every case, you know, the forest legacy is unique within our authorities, you know, on the staff that Claire and I work on in cooperative forestry of the suite of programs. You know, legacy is unique in that it's a 25% cost share, so it's already more modest, and that's somewhat in recognition of the costs that we're engaged in. And, you know, administrative monies are also provided to, you know, to help work through some of the due diligence. So if you know, if and also like the size of the project, you know, we started thinking about these as relatively small. People have, you know, wanted, you know, have pointed out and wanted to make in some cases these bigger because of the communities they're in and the prices of land. So, you know, of course, everything, you know, it's somewhat site specific, but we do believe that there's a real opportunity here to move more quickly in some of these cases if we're you know, if we can offer this relief in this case. But if it's, you know, if it's going to take a long time, and, you know, and it's kind of a, hey, we need a cost waiver because we haven't tried anything, you know, that's not what we're really thinking of. I don't think, you know, we're trying to, we want to marshal this great resource that we have, and we want to leverage this resource of the cost waiver in the most appropriate places on the most appropriate tracks.
So I will summarize.
Yeah.
We will consider it case by case with the justification of the need, not, you know, and what I was trying to say before, it's not just because you're in this area, therefore you're automatically counted. It's going to be case by case basis, justification of the need for a match waiver for what you're proposing.
Thank you, guys. So there were a couple of questions about large landscape projects, by contrast, asking about minimum acreage. One from Mount Grace in Massachusetts, I'm assuming because there's not a whole lot of acreage, but there can be real landscape level impacts to projects. So do you want to address that at all, minimum acreage?
So as a program, we do not have a minimum acreage for any of our projects. That is, some states do have minimum acreage as part of the forest action plans. For large, high impact projects, we could have had a lot of fun debating what was large versus not on an acre basis. It's so contextual. What is a large in Rhode Island is very different from what's large in Montana. So the answer is no. We're holding to you self-define what is large, high impact for your landscape, your community, your geography of focus. and know that the overall way that our program has operated is we accept and embrace that what is a conservation win and whether it's the public benefits that are being advanced and conserved, or it's the strategic contribution on the landscape, the stories vary so much across the country that we're still going to embrace that, and that there's not one exact what equals a good forest legacy project, and we have a certain definition of it. We're going to allow you to self-define that and embrace the diversity of forest types, forest conditions, public benefits, and size and scale across the country.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, you well said. And we know that some of the projects that are sort of being worked on now, we know some ones that are really large in acreage, but there's a few key things to keep in mind is, if you're piecing together pieces of land of multiple ownerships, that's going to best fit in the normal process. But these are projects where and it's often the dollars that are the challenge, not necessarily the acres. And sometimes we do some smaller projects that are very, very expensive. So these are so we can target some of those kinds of things. It's these large projects or high impact projects we're dealing with one landowner. Just a reminder to go back to that. And it's at a scale that's where we can bring the money to bear in a size and in a time frame where we can bring some landowners to the table where otherwise we have had challenges bringing some landowners to the table.
Actually, so they were asking about minimum financial amount rather than acreage. So the cap is 50 million. Is there a floor on those large landscape ones?
Or
a floor financial amount?
Oh, well, that's because somebody's being astutely watching the details that we have slightly changed in this presentation. The last version that we shared with the state coordinators and kind of where we first started was that we would have a minimum of $20 million. A project needed to be at least $20 million of federal funding requested, up to 50. The idea there was to go above and beyond what is possible through our normal process. We've heard and are actively considering some pretty wise feedback that we heard that, well, if you set the floor at 20, you're really directing this opportunity to a few landscapes, few states where the real estate values command that. And you're not necessarily, achieving the idea or the challenge of what can you move forward that's once in a lifetime? What are those unique, amazing deals that having money on the table in a more certain, fast way than otherwise, and at this and a kind of this flexibility of scale all the way up to 50 would make it open the door in more places. And so right now we are envisioning this as up to 50 and not having that lower cap, recognizing that that's going to make some more interplay with our normal process. And so we will, and I think we're accepting that to be able to provide more opportunities and creative exploration around this opportunity across the country. Not a final decision yet, but that's where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of, there's the danger of, as there always is, right, sort of favoring, I don't want to say greatest capacity, but, where there might be the greatest amount of available, funds for cost share. We are anticipating, again, like Claire shared, high impact and high leverage, but, saying, well, it's got to be at least 20 million, you're sort of narrowing your pool and artificially pushing it up in a way, whereas you could be blocking people out because of, even at a high leverage amount, it's not possible for something when you're thinking 20 million, So this whole process has been very, very interesting because there's lots of things you can think through as people who've been at this for a while. But there's a lot of things that that people have shared, and then of course there's some things where, you know, of course not every opportunity is going to be possible.
So I just want to flag that we have just a few minutes left in the scheduled time, and I don't know if you, Scott or Claire or others can continue, but we also want to be able to capture any questions that are in the Q&A that we didn't get to, and how to handle those. But Amy, is there one more set we can handle while we're here? While we're all here?
I think we've captured a lot of them, but we will capture them all and make sure that they can get answered. There was a question about allowing qualified nonprofits to hold interest. Will that expand the program's capacity? Are there any reservations to making that change? I'll just say on behalf of the LWCF Coalition that we have grave reservations about making that change because it requires opening up those underlying authorities that Claire and Scott have mentioned are not changed by the IRA funding. That's something that we have had reservations about as we have fought to maintain the current the authorities for Forest Legacy and LWCF writ large as they exist right now against those who would fundamentally change and weaken the program. And those reservations are shared by bipartisan champions on Capitol Hill who fought alongside us for the last decade to keep the program intact the way it is and how it works very successfully, and get it permanently authorized and funded. I will say, though, that there are lots of partners who have interest in expanding capacity by allowing nonprofits to hold interest. And there is a really great proposal out there for in Congress right now, hopefully that will end up in the Farm Bill, to create a parallel program called the Forest Conservation Easement Program that would parallel the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, ASEP. That we think would be a great way for that to happen without having to open up those Forest Legacy and underlying LWCF statutory authorities. So we're all optimistic that that might be a solution. One person, I will mention, one person asked about, you know, can we give a calendar timeframe starting from the application to money getting to the owner? Because the fiscal year language is confusing for folks who are not steeped in this kind of stuff. Maybe that's something that you might be able to provide that we could send on in email. Let's see. There was a question about urban forestry projects. I think that that's entirely separate from this effort. Is that right? So that's an easily answered question. I don't know if there's there's a place where they can find out more information about urban forestry projects separate from Forest Legacy.
Our urban and community forestry colleagues have a similar endeavor in works of IRA funding as well as core funding, and actively delivering that. So yes, we can get that contact information for the director overseeing that effort. I think on that, I actually wanted to just jump in and say, there's no way we can fully address and hear from all of you in this large of a forum. We are in active listen mode, receiving feedback. Please reach out. Feel free to reach out to Scott or I, or I, over the next couple weeks. We do need to wrap up the feedback part of this process by the end of March. That's a pretty, end of March is coming soon. But please share, especially in that time frame, anything that's you weren't able to share today or you wanted offline. Project examples is actually quite helpful of, how does this opportunity fit or doesn't fit. Some of that will just play out over time, but if you've got something that you're really puzzling through after hearing the information today, that helps us to see kind of how these things might play out in real life. I meant to put a slide up that said our email addresses.
We can share that after to the
Yeah.
list of participants, we'll make sure everyone has everyone has your contact information so they can
Okay.
follow
I
up.
was, yeah, I was going to
Please
say, we'll
note
send out a follow-up note that has the recording, which we'll post on the LWCF Coalition website that has your contact information and ours, so that we can follow up and make sure that all of the additional questions do get run down. So thank you all.
And I'm going to extend that, listening mode to our regional colleagues that are on the call, our program managers, as well as our state coordinators. We've all been, collecting and hearing feedback and discussing these ideas with all of you. So it doesn't have to be Scott or I. Feel free to, work with those, state or regional level if you've got the relationships there. And then we will also follow up with a further call, sharing once we have these 2 funding announcements solidified and out the door to further answer questions about these different opportunities and the sideboards and rules for each one of them.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just in closing, I mean, this has just been a really informative, there's a lot to it. And so I think you're rightly anticipating follow-up from folks because it's different and it's a little bit intricate and the calendar is challenging. So we'll make sure your information gets out to folks as well as the state coordinator list. So everyone's talking on the same page, but we really, really appreciate the time you've given to this, to the listening mode, because I think that's not always the case with proposals that agencies have. So we appreciate the opportunity at many levels to do that. If there's any closing comments you want to make to folks before we let everyone go, we're just a little bit over, but.
I'm going to let Scott do closing because I did a lot of talking here today.
Close us out, Scott.
Oh, righty. Well, thanks so much for everybody, everybody sticking it out here. It's like, tells us, just reminds us of the great partnerships that we have. We've, Claire and I were talking the other day and we were kind of joking. I think we recognize though what we had kind of put together when we first started reaching out to all our state partners and our nonprofit partners and everybody. We still recognize that original, those ideas, but they're definitely different now than they were then, as we've learned from all of you and taken that into account. And we're really grateful for all the time and all the partnership and with that, just thanks so much. And we look forward to continue to working with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
everyone
Thanks
so much
everyone
for participating.